Hi, I'm Richa Bansal, founder of Pink Careers and host of Fearless Career Moves podcast, a practical guide for ambitious women who are redefining success and building thriving careers and lives on their own terms. Join me as I share step by step job search strategies, leadership lessons, expert interviews, and battle tested career advice so you can ditch imposter syndrome for good and take your confidence, career, and impact to the next level. Women can indeed have it all, and I'm here to show you how. Today on the podcast, I'm really excited to speak with Alan Stein, a dear friend and founder and CEO of Kadima Careers. Alan truly embodies what it means to make fearless career moves. Over the last 3 decades of his corporate career, he rose from manager to global department head at top companies like Google, Meta, Salesforce, and American Express. He led high performing teams and was even named Google's Manager of the Year. But what makes Alan stand out isn't just his corporate resume. It's his fearless leap from earning over $500,000 a year to helping others land top jobs with strategy, not luck. What Alan found throughout his career is that there are a lot of biases and inefficiencies in the way companies hire people. Perfectly qualified candidates are ghosted or rejected from roles for no good reason. For all the talk of diversity, the corporate playing field is not even close to being level. Join Alan and I as we talk about how to navigate the broken hiring process, break through biases, and take charge of our career growth, even when the odds seem to be stacked against you. Welcome, Alan. I'm excited to have this conversation with you.
Thanks so much, Richa. I'm really excited to be on the podcast with you. I know I follow you a lot on LinkedIn. We've been on podcasts before and always great talking careers with you.
Amazing. First thing I wanted to ask you, I think I wanted to ask you this forever. Why did you decide to name your company Kadima Careers? Like, what does it really mean?
That's a great question. So I was thinking about a company that would accelerate careers, not just get people their next job, but to really accelerate their long-term career growth. So I originally called the company Treat People Right Talent Accelerator Incorporated, and that was too long. So I was having drinks with a buddy of mine. His name's David, and we're talking about how to say other words for the company. And we're talking about acceleration, and he's Hebrew. He told me the word for acceleration in Hebrew, which is a terrible name, but the word forward or like advance is kedima. And it also happens to align with a childhood game I used to play with. And it is also a saying which means forward or advance, like andale, andale, like kadima, kadima. So it's a really apt name for what we're trying to do with careers of moving people forward in their careers.
Oh, that's amazing. This is truly like an amazing backstory for the name of the company that you have. It truly embodies what you're trying to do, accelerate a million careers by 2030. Is that right?
2040. Give me a little time, please. 2040. 2040.
Accelerate a million careers by 2040. So, Alan, you had what many will call a dream corporate career. I mean, you were making over $500,000. You were exec at some of the top companies like Google and Salesforce and Meta. So, what really, like, was there a trigger moment? Was there like a trigger when something when you said enough is enough, or maybe not enough is enough, but this is the right moment for me to walk away from what I have and what I'm building for 3 decades and start Kadima Careers?
First off, I get very focused on words like dream, and I don't believe that dream jobs exist because I have arguably worked at some of the best companies in the world, like Google. I was head of scaled customer operations at Google, and I was director of data management at Meta. And I led global programs at Salesforce. They all sound like dream jobs. They all paid at or above $500,000 a year, but they were far from dreams. There were politics and bullshit and hypocrisy that exist at these companies that many people are comfortable dealing with. I'm not someone who deals well with that, so it was triggering in me. I've learned to become a little bit more calm with those sort of things in my older ages, but I don't put up with hypocrisy, bullshit, and politics well. And you need to bite your tongue sometimes when you're working at companies with those sort of things. And so I advise clients now that there's a lot of pros going into those dream companies. For people at home, I'm using the air quotes there because I don't believe dream companies exist, but no job is perfect. There's always a better job.
I agree with you. I don't think necessarily dream companies exist, or whenever I have had several clients who come and they want to work with me and they say, Richa, Google is my dream company, or Microsoft is my dream company. One time I had a client who came to me and said, Richa, I only want to work for Microsoft because they're my dream company. And once we started working together, 2 months in, they're like, I don't think I want to work for the company I thought was my dream company anymore. Because to your point, I don't believe in dream companies. And what I believe in is, a dream role. And you define what that dream role is for you. Right? You define what makes it a dream role. Right? And that may be more than just the paycheck, that may be more than just the scope. You have to kind of, for me, I believe that you also have to take into consideration your what season of life you are in at that point. What are some of your personal preferences or personal goals? And the whole package might make it a dream role. So I'm just curious to hear kind of your take on, as you work with clients and you work in very similar fields where you're also helping folks find their dream role, again in air quotes. How do you think about helping them define what that dream role might be for them?
So again, I'm neurodiverse. I get very focused on terminology, especially like words. I don't think dream jobs, dream roles exist either. So I actually have a spreadsheet on
Hmm.
the 31 jobs I've held, and I've had 38 bosses, and I've had worked at 22 companies, and I grade each of those 38 opportunities, the boss and the company and the role. And the role gets an average GPA of a 3.4. The boss gets an average GPA of 2.6 out of 4, or like stars, if you're thinking about stars. None of them were perfect.
Hmm.
And there's always something better. So, also, if people are going for this dream, like I'm fearful that if people are chasing a dream, they're never going to be satisfied with where they land because in my 31 experiences, I have yet to find that dream. I'm working academic careers now, which is a great opportunity. I've been at the company for it's 5 years old. I wouldn't call it a dream. like there, I love the job. I love what we're building at Kadima. Is it a dream? No. By a dream, like I would be earning shit ton of money in my fifth year and just kicking back on vacation all the time and letting other people do the work. But no, um, it's not a dream.
Yeah, I think what I'm hearing from you is that you have to learn to be, learn to be happy in the present. And if we keep chasing like a fantasy role or a dream role, we can never be happy, right? We can never be happy. So build, work hard, and then party hard,
Yeah,
essentially.
yeah. Like set goals. Always be striving for better. There's a
Yeah.
like while I don't believe in dream jobs or dream companies, I always believe in better jobs. So there's always something better. You don't always need to be getting something better. There's plenty of times in your life and career where you're totally satisfied with where you are. Your life is good. Your job is good. It's a good work-life balance. You don't need to be moving.
Yeah.
But if you're not 100% satisfied with your life and your career, ask yourself, what would make me more satisfied and more excited? And then write it down or think about it and then go get it.
Amazing, amazing. So for those of us who want something more, right? They may not be satisfied with where they are. They want something more, and they're like, I would like to work for some of the top tier companies that exist out there. I would like to work for the Google and the Metas and the Salesforce. I'm curious to hear. I mean, as a hiring manager who has hired hundreds, if not thousands, of people for their teams, have you seen like some of the common myths that people believe about working for these companies or getting hired at these companies that you would like to dissolve?
This the myths are that you can apply cold to these companies and get a job from there. That's a myth. The myths are that these companies are going to knock at your door. and hire you. That's a myth. So the reality is any of these companies are attainable for anyone. They may not be attainable in your next step, but for everybody out there, there might be two, three, four steps before you're Google worthy or OpenAI worthy or name the company. But there are just a number of steps until you're worthy to be considered for those companies. And by the way, being considered for those companies is the best that you can do. You can influence the decision, but you can't make the decision to hire you. You can put yourself in the best spot to be hired and hope that through a confluence of events that you're not up against the CEO, like Sam Altman's nephew, that happens to be interviewing for the job at OpenAI also. But there are things that you can do to put yourself in that position. And I came from I'm a first generation college student and went to public school. My grandfather was a cab driver in New York City, and yeah, I did have a lot of privilege being born in the U.S., being born a white dude, being born during a good economic time. But I'm Jewish also. I could have been born in 1932 in Munich.
So for those of you, you said sometimes you are two, three, four steps away from being considered, being worthy of working for some of the companies that we talked about today, like the Google and the Metas. What makes somebody like three steps away? And then what can somebody do to patch that gap?
So I'll just give the very quick hop of me going from a PhD in clinical psychology to Google. So I dropped out of that. I did temp work. The temp work led me to a role on Wall Street. I became an equity analyst on Wall Street. Then I moved up in equity research, and then through a friend of mine who happened to play fantasy baseball with me, recruited me to work in venture capital. I wound up in venture capital just through serendipity. I was in venture capital. I wasn't good at it. I had a desire to pursue my passion. I thought I was going to be Billy Bean. I was going to work for the Oakland A's. I was going to be a baseball general manager. I got a job for the Brooklyn Cyclones and the Toronto Blue Jays minor league team by building relationships. Then I realized that the pay sucked and that I had to reinvent myself. And I had to reinvent myself as a marketer. So I figured out how to get a marketing internship, and I figured out how to get into business school. And I went to Columbia Business School. I figured out how to get into a top business school. I figured out which schools would be on my target list, and I studied for the tests to get into there. And then getting into there helped to reset me, helped to pivot me into marketing, which allowed American Express to recruit me on campus. Even though I wanted to work in tech then, tech companies weren't hiring there. Worked in Amex for 5.5 years. Then I looked at lots of roles externally. Sometimes recruiters came to me. Sometimes I would apply over those 5.5 years. I applied 5 times to get a job at Google for jobs that I was really good fit for, and I never got a response from any of those applications. Then finally, I'm having drinks with a buddy of mine who I went to Binghamton, my undergrad with. And he's like, "Hey, I have a friend." He's like, I was complaining about how slow it was to work at American Express and how I was underpaid. And he's like, "Why don't you work at Google?" It's like, "I would love to, dude. They won't take my resume." He's like, "Well, my buddy Ben works there. You want to talk to him?" I was like, "Sure." I speak to Ben. The next day after speaking to Ben, my resume gets put into the recruiter. I still had to interview 11 interviews later, and lots of preparation that was not needed and killing 2 weekends. But I prepared the hell to get past those interviews, and I got the job at Google. So that's how you get, like, that's one way to get the job, but part of it is being proactive. Part of it is building the relationships that you may not have now. Part of it is setting those goals. Part of it is taking action.
Absolutely. I kind of like heard three big themes in your career journey throughout. One, you talked about making your own experience, right? And so if you're missing some of the experience that will get you to the roles that you want to get into, or get into the companies that you want to get into, it's so easy now in today's day and age to make your own experience. Like when you started a long time ago, you started with doing some temp work in a certain area. That opened doors to another opportunity, that opened doors to another opportunity, and then to some relationships and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
So make your own experience. If you have a resume gap, you're missing a skill, if you need to like get onto some skill, you can do some easy coursework, you can do some pro bono work, you can start your 1% company and create some own experience that way. You can take on some temp work, you can take some non-paid work. There's many ways to create your own experience, and we have clients who've actually done that. That has helped them, very similar to your journey, open the doors to the next step. The second thing I heard was relationships and how important relationships is in helping you, again, open some of those doors. And you still have to work your way through. You still have to work really hard and doing the preparation that the level of preparation that it takes to get into the type of companies that many of the candidates want to work at. But relationships can really accelerate opening those doors. And that helped you do that as well. And I have a question and a take on relationships that will come to you, come to you in just a second. And the third one I heard, the big theme was persistence, that you never gave up, right? So you always ask, okay, so what else needs to be done? So what else needs to be done? So what else I can do, right? And then when Google rejected you 5 times, you didn't take it personally and mean something about you and whether you are good enough or not. You just like ask the question, okay, how do I put my foot forward differently next time so that I can prove that I am the right candidate to bring to the interview process? And so building your own experience, relationships, and that consistent problem solving, staying in the problem solving mode, not getting into the victim mindset where, oh, the economy is bad and that's why I'm not getting hired, or they only hired the relatives and that's why I'm not getting hired. But instead asking yourself, how is that possible? Because I know it is possible. It's just a matter of when and how.
Yeah. You mentioned the victim mindset, and a big pet peeve of mine are people that take a victim mindset, because shit can happen to any of us. And then how are you going to deal with that? So one of my early leaders at Google talked about like the ownership mindset, and he would quote Jocko Willink, who wrote Extreme Ownership. And that's a little off the deep end. He's like a military, he's a Navy SEAL, and he's pretty extreme. But the point is, when life gives you lemons, what are you going to do with it? You're gonna cry and let the sourness ruin your day, or are you going to turn it into lemonade? And it's your choice how you deal with the shit that life gives you.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I remember like I had been on your podcast several months ago, and I had talked about my own journey with immigration, my own struggle with immigration. And when my company told me that we're not going to do your green card and you figure it out, I had to very quickly realize that I can either continue to stay on my company's mercy or you figure out plan B for yourself. And I
Yep.
think we all can own our careers that way. We all can figure out our plan Bs, because whether we decide to stay without a plan B or we make our plan B, it's a decision that we own. It's a choice. And once we start accepting that everything is a choice, whether we improve our candidacy or whether we stay stuck or whether we blame it on the economy, we blame it on the manager, or we take action to improve things and actually make changes for the positive in our life, it's all a decision that is in our control. We all have agency. At least the people who are listening to this podcast, they do.
Yeah. And right. uh, we have a lot of control in our lives, and for the things that we do not have control, then stop worrying about it.
That's not worrying about it. So I have a question for you, and that's something that it's a pet peeve of mine too, because I hear a lot of folks talk about in my industry that we have to build relationships to get our foot in the door, and like you talked about how relationships helped you put your foot in the door, and I believe that as well. It can accelerate opportunities. But I also work with a lot of clients who do not have those relationships, and relationship is really a long term game, right? Like that buddy of yours that you have drinks with, it didn't just happen like in a moment. Over time, you build some true relationships. Otherwise, they stay transactional. So many are clients that I work with, many folks that I work with, many of them are women. They may have followed their partners from another country. They may have no network or zero network or very close to zero network in the US. And in that case, they may have some really excellent experience. In fact, I recently had a client who had excellent experience in Singapore, over 20 years of experience in our field in Singapore. And she got this message from recruiters and well-wishers over and over again that, you should network, you should send out cold DMs and cold messages to find your way and foot in the door. And that was very, very hard for her, right? So we worked on some things that allowed her to bypass this whole sort of relation, leaning only on relationships. And she now works at one of the big five. But I'm curious to hear your take on what can somebody do who does not have really strong relationships with somebody or in with somebody who works for now we call the Mango or the Fang Plus. How can they break in?
First off, the fact that your friend or client says that networking is tough, good. Let it be tough. If it was easy, everybody would be doing it. This is something where, with a little bit of effort, we as candidates can stand out. So if you don't want to put in any work and get a good job, good luck. Uh, if you want a good job, often you got to put in a little work. It's like if you want a good body at the gym, some people are just born with amazing body. Most people need to work on it. Some people, there might be a job that just lands in your lap. Most of the time, you're going to have to work for it. And part of the work that you need to do is to build relationships. You can choose not to. However, based on my experience, based on research, based on how you see other successful people achieve their success, it's with the help of other people. It's not with the isolation from other people. So everybody started with zero network. I started with a really tiny network from blue collar Long Island. Um, my dad didn't go to college. My mom graduated college the same year I did. We both went to like SUNY, like state schools in New York, and we figured this shit out. So it's not like it's easy. And the way you get people's feet in the door is by building relationships. And it's not about us opening our LinkedIn profile and say, hey, reach out to anyone that I'm connected to. Instead, it's like teaching people how to reach out to individuals that they may be connected to and they forgot about, or how to easily and in a like a unassuming way build new relationships. Like I don't know how you and I initially met, but one of us reached out to the other person on LinkedIn and probably said something like, hey, it looks like you're doing some interesting stuff. I'm doing interesting stuff too. You want to chat? I don't exactly remember how we met, but it was probably some commonality of we're both in the career acceleration space.
I think it was exactly like that, right? And I agree with you in terms of if networking was easy, everybody would be doing it. And I also think part of what networking makes it so, and part of it, why networking is so hard for people is mindset. Okay, or like the self-limiting mindset that people put on themselves, that if I am reaching out to somebody else for help, then I am asking for them for a favor. Or how do I reach out to somebody who I haven't spoken to in 10 years because I am then seeking help? And somehow people associate seeking help with being for doing something wrong. Somehow like there's something wrong with seeking help. And the way I like to think about it is that if somebody is giving you help, it's because most people do actually want to give help. In fact, one of the HBR articles I remember I read a long time ago talked about 90% of the help in the workplace is given when asked. And people actually want to give help because people love hearing about how their help helped you succeed. So if you close the loop with them, people love, because everybody loves to help, right? Like they appreciate that something that you did for somebody else helped you win in certain way. And if you close the loop with them, that is the best thing that you can do to further give into that, like build your bank,
Yeah.
further put food sort of like, put further into that relationship. And then one of the other things that I like to kind of suggest to my clients is it doesn't matter if you ask for help and you couldn't do something in return for them, as long as you can do something in return for somebody else who is in the same shoes that you are in right now. If you are willing to do something for somebody else who's like where you are right now, then you've passed the good karma around. And that's all that matters.
Yep. Yeah. There's a lot of research. If you read Adam Grant's book, Give and Take, or I, whatever it is, it makes me feel better to help people. People like to help people. And yeah, like, yeah, we want to make money doing it too because we have bills to pay. But people like giving advice, and yeah, so
Yeah, I mean,
there's lots of mental obstacles that people have, that, oh, I don't have the time, or people will say no to me, or I don't want to be a burden on someone. Whatever effing excuse it is, just get over it and trust us that it works. And the more that you do it, the more it will be comfortable. And by the way, when you have these conversations with people, and if you flip the script at the end and thank them for their time and say, hey, thank you so much for your advice, how can I ever return the favor? And if they ask you to do something for them, my hunch is you'll do it and you'll feel better about yourself too.
I think mindset is also super key as we think about some of the other actual biases that do exist in the hiring system, right? And how we tackle them. Because again, biases do exist. So that's the reality of the hiring system. Biases like
Mm-hmm.
ageism is one of the most common bias that I
Yep.
hear
Yep.
from my clients. Whether somebody would say like, "I am too old, and that's why I didn't get hired,"
Yep.
or "I'm too young, and that's why I didn't get hired for this director role. That's why I didn't get the opportunity director role." And from like, this is what I believe. Like there is reality to that too, right? There is some of it is opinion, some of it is your limiting belief as a candidate, and some of it is reality.
Yep.
And so I'm curious to kind of hear your take on as you hired again for several, like many candidates for your own teams. What have you seen in terms of what's reality and what's an actual limiting belief? And to what extent is reality, what extent is it's limiting belief?
First off, there's biases that exist against gender, against age, against immigration, against race. Not just in recruiting, in life.
In life.
It just happens. Against body type, against height, against all these things, there are inherent biases that exist that will lead humans to think one way about you than other, just because of stereotypes. It happened in recruiting. It happens in presidential elections. It happens in popularity contests. It happens in social media. It just happens. So, what are you going to do about it? Going back to that ownership mindset. If you're 51 years old, that's what I am. I think that's young, but some people might say that's old. That's your call, how you want to choose it. I'm a white dude. Does that work to my advantage? In most cases, yeah. In some cases, not. Like I just applied to talk at women in product talk. I'm a man. It's probably not going to work in my advantage to get that speaking opportunity. I'm not. I'm not crying over that. There are biases that exist in everything. You just need to control what you do about those biases. And the biggest thing that I would suggest that you do about those biases is eliminate anchoring from what you think that you're worth or what you think that you can obtain because of what you've obtained in the past. Because black women earn about 73 cents on the dollar versus white women, or versus like white dudes, I think. Um, so if you're going in to negotiate for a job and you're a white dude and a black woman and you're asking for money, you are going to ask for less money as a black woman because you've been anchoring on what you've been paid in the past, versus a white dude has probably been getting paid more. So he expects more. Regardless of what you expect, don't make it easier for other people with their biases.
Absolutely. What are like one or two things, maybe one or two examples that you can give that you might have coached your clients on in terms of how to tackle these biases? So for example, you talked about as a black woman, there's a real bias against paying them getting paid less than a white dude. So maybe if you can share one or two like examples of actual
Yeah.
clients that you work with and how you help them tackle those biases.
Yeah. So, one thing, if you are of a small a minority group and there are other minority individuals within the company that you know of, there are often avenues for those groups to um, to submit applicants for referrals. So the ERGs, employee resource groups. If you know someone who is a black woman at Google and you're a black woman, they usually have a inside track through the employee resource groups to nominate you as a candidate, which will give you a higher likelihood of getting selected. That's one way. So if you leverage the ERGs, you can't do that externally, but you can internally through knowing people within the organization. And most big companies have these ERGs. Secondly, the thing you can do as someone who's an underrepresented minority, don't talk about compensation. This is for everybody, but most importantly for people that are likely underpaid historically. Deflect, defer, and decline to talk about compensation until you get the offer. And then when you get the offer, you can use other negotiation tactics, but ask for more. You will almost, if you approach a negotiation in a humble and respectful manner, and in about 90 plus percent of the cases, people will get more. And there's no skin off the back of the company. And in fact, most companies are offering you a lower offer to start with because they are expecting and anticipate that you negotiate. And you worked at Amazon, so you know that like Amazon is a case in point of using that process.
Absolutely. I mean, companies always want to anchor you on the lower end of what they are willing to pay. And so, to your tip, I want to like kind of play devil's advocate a little bit to your second tip around do not share your compensation expectations right until you get an offer. Most times the recruiting team will force you to give a number or a range or something, and they would say, even if you say like share the budget with us, or I'm not comfortable sharing my range until we move forward in the process, they will still pressure you to give a number or a range. And in that case, like, what is your strategy or feedback to your clients on what could they do to continue deflecting the question about compensation?
So script first is I want to get paid fairly and in line with the scope and impact of the role. That
Okay.
will usually shut most people down. If they go further, you can say, hey, I'm really excited to work here at Spotify. Compensation's not going to get in the way. If they push forward again, which has happened in less than 5% of the cases, I'm not really familiar with how Stripe compensates their employees. Do you mind sharing that with me? Write it down and say, oh, interesting. That's different than how Amazon used to compensate me. I got to think about this and can I get back to you? And you'll never need to get back to them. Another good, like, so that will work like a charm. Another thing in many states, they have to declare the compensation on the job description. Just say that what's on the job description is within the ballpark. And then
Amazing, amazing. Yeah.
you
I,
just want to move ahead until you get the offer because once the offer is conveyed to you, the company is revealing their cards that you're their top choice. And now, for the first time in the whole situation, you have some leverage in the game.
okay, amazing. I think nobody can argue with, I believe that you will pay us fairly.
Yeah.
Um, Great. Thank you for sharing those tips. The next question I want to cover is, as a hiring manager, again at some of these top companies, what are some of the like top qualities you look for in candidates?
Uh, Despite me interviewing about 2,000 people, I still think I'm only about
Wow.
70% correct with my assessment of people through an interview. I think there's a lot better ways to assess talent through referrals, past work samples, and yeah, those methods. But with interviewing, some of the best methods that I do is try to have structured interview processes where multiple different people are involved and they give their opinion and we don't bias each other during the feedback. And that's I'm trying to I also in my questions I try to assess authenticity versus bullshit. So some people I'm a very good bullshitter and so I can also detect bullshit from other people when they're just using a lot of big words and there's no substance behind it. Sometimes I have to dig a little bit deeper, but if someone loses credibility with me because they're bullshitting me on something, I will discount almost everything else said. I'd rather have someone say, I'm not familiar with that topic, rather than bullshit me in a way which, after a couple of questions, I realized that they don't know what the fuck they're talking about. And I had that recently where someone was talking about their experience with HubSpot. And it's okay if you didn't have experience with it and you have some sort of proxy, but she was clearly bullshitting her way through it. And she was basically eliminated from the role after
I
that.
think it's very easy to lose credibility. Like literally, it takes a nanosecond to lose credibility because you say one thing that makes the hiring manager feel like you're bullshitting, or you're saying something false, or you're lying. And if they sense it, you've lost credibility for yourself. You've lost that interview right away. And for me, like that's a red flag as well. And for having worked at Amazon, there are many things I like about the company and many things I don't. But one thing I did like was how structured their process was, and the fact that they had the bar raiser to really bring that level of unbiasedness in the whole process, with the hiring manager sometimes really like trying their very hard to bring on the people that they know or whatnot. And um, that that fairness needs to be maintained. Some companies are doing a good job at it for sure. And the more structured, the more like from a candidate lens, you can understand that everything that you put on your resume, everything that comes out of your mouth should be based on truth. Faking it till you make it does not work in the interview process. And so if you're really faking it to make it and faking the gaps to make it, like you're doing it wrong. And those will be identified as red flags very, very soon.
Yeah. Amazon and Google, of all the companies I've either worked at or interviewed at or am familiar at, consistently have the best interview process. And Amazon's probably even better than Google's in terms of their structure and rigor to it. If you can pass Amazon interviews like you have, you can pass Google interviews, you can pretty much you've demonstrated your capability to get into any company, and then it's just a matter of getting enough swings up at the plate. There's some different companies that have tough interviews like Cap One and McKinsey, but like
Exactly, exactly. Like, I mean,
interviews are beatable.
I tell every client, like, if you can prepare for the Amazon interview level, then you can get into any damn company you desire.
Yeah, exactly.
I think we're very kind of aligned in terms of how we prepare our candidates. So the last kind of like a couple of topics that I would love to cover with you before because we can go on forever and forever, or different topics that you want to cover here. But really, the topic of owning your career is incomplete if you just leave it to getting hired to some of the best companies in the world. What's also important is how we treat the first 30, 60, 90 days on a new job. Because when we coming back to the topic of relationship, best relationships are built through work ethics and by demonstrating yourself that I was the right sort of candidate to bring to the team. I was the right person to bring on the team. And that becomes the start of these fruitful relationships that will continue to go on for years to come. So, what is your advice on somebody who's starting out in a new company on what should they do in the first 30, 60, 90 days on the job to prove to the hiring team that they indeed made the right decision?
Yeah. So the first 90 days is so critical, but you need to build relationships with your manager. If you are coming in as a people manager, it's usually your manager, your key stakeholders, and then your team. Although I wouldn't fault anyone for putting their team first, but uh, and you also want to have clear alignment with your manager, your leader, of what you anticipate delivering in those first 90 days. Those 90 days are critical. And ideally, you have a good sense coming into the job, or you've been giving some good guidance on what is expected of you. If not, if you're coming in at a more senior role, often you're expected to kind of suggest what you imagine delivering in those first 90 days. But whether it's top down or bottom up or a combination thereof, it's really important to get alignment with you and your leader of what that success looks like.
Amazing. Yeah, I think also that building relationships and understanding the lay of the land and how who is who in the room, how are people related with each other in terms of
Yes.
like from a work perspective. I think that is very important as well. As you're building relationships with your manager and your stakeholders, key stakeholders and your team members, also just kind of listening to what's being said between the lines so that you can understand who has real power in the room, right?
Mm,
What is being said, what is being said that is not being said in words. Who are people leaning towards? Who's really the decision maker in the room? And really understanding
yes.
the lay of the land is also crucial in the first 90 days.
Yeah, that's critical, and often that comes with the org chart. And I forgot to mention the org chart.
Yes.
Understand the org chart. Understand how you roll up to the CEO, and everyone around you going up to the CEO. Like you may not understand on day one, but seek to learn within 90 days what your relationship are with these other stakeholders between you and the CEO,
Yep.
because uh, especially as you get higher in the organization, there's going to be more overlap and more political motivations that are going to be coming down that don't necessarily make sense to you unless you tie it back to the org chart and people's power and hierarchy.
Amazing, amazing. So we talked about a lot of like great things, Alan, today. We talked about what really is a dream career and if there is actually a dream career or dream role to for those who still want to pursue their dream careers, what could that look like if they are in the recruiting process? What are some of the biases that they need to be aware of? How can they tackle some of these biases and these like the internal processes that go on to get their foot in the door, to how does somebody change their mindset to move away from externalizing their results to really taking deep agency and control of their career, to how can somebody set themselves up for success once they get into these dream companies and roles in the first 30, 69 days. If Alan, you were to distill everything into like one and only one piece of feedback that somebody can take away from this episode today, what would that be?
Set achievable goals and go forth and execute. So, or plan the work and then work the plan. And so, if you're giving me just like one piece of advice, plan the work, then work the plan.
Plan the work and work the plan. Thank you so much, Alan, for your time today. It was such a wonderful conversation. I really appreciated all the insights that you shared with our listeners today. And where can people learn more about the work that you do and how you help your clients as well?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on the show, Richa. I love chatting shop with you. Folks can find me on LinkedIn. They can also go to kadimacareers.com, Kadima careers.com. And
Amazing. Thank you. Bye, everyone.
bye bye.
Thank you for tuning in. If you loved today's episode, be sure to follow or subscribe and give us a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your favorite podcast platform. Your feedback really helps us get this podcast in the hands of other amazing, high achieving women so they can also build careers they love on their own terms. And if you are ready to take your career to the next level, check out the Fearless Hire, our signature career accelerator for ambitious women ready to step into high impact leadership roles. You can learn more at www.pinkcareers.com. Until next time, stay fearless.